Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Valerie Leyva. I am a clinical supervisor for Stan County BHRS. And today we are going to talk about an intern training regarding play therapy. Play therapy takes a long time to learn how to use all the skills. And so this is not meant to be a one and done kind of training where you'll know how to do play therapy when you finish the video. This video is about the different types of play therapy, how they are used, why are they used, and how to describe it to caregivers, particularly as caregivers say and see what we do with clients who are very young and say, well, why are you just playing games? How is that helpful? So there are a few videos in this as well as a link to a website with some play therapy toys, and I'd like to start sharing the PowerPoint now. All right. So just to review, play therapy are games, play, art materials, creative arts materials used to assist a person to express themselves. And it's particularly used with people who do not have the words to express their thoughts, feelings, or memories. Typically, this is done with children. You can engage in play therapy with children around 3 to 4 years old. Most youths will continue to engage in some play until early adolescence, and many youths will continue to use creative arts materials throughout adolescence into young adulthood. You can also use some play therapy techniques with adults if they're willing to do that. Many adults have not developed some of the skills needed to express themselves emotionally, or perhaps they had a traumatic experiences when they were very young and did not have the opportunity to process those experiences at that time, or they weren't ready to, whatever, what have you, rather. And so you can use this with adults, but I'm primarily going to be talking about using this with children today. So the learning objectives are to understand how and when to introduce play therapy and how to explain its use to caregivers, and exploring 3 play therapy methods to utilize with either children or adults. So although we're not live right now, I want you to think through what activities you have used with children or adults to help them express their feelings when they don't have words. Sometimes we use music to do this. Some people can use movement or dance to do this. Some like lyrics to songs or poetry. Some will draw a picture. Some people will use clay. So there are lots of different ways that you can utilize other than talking therapy to help children, adolescents, young adults, and older adults to express themselves when they don't have words. But let's shift for a minute to looking at how children learn. Children learn by observing and mimicking the people and activities that they observe. Think of a school ground with kids who are 6 years old to 10 or 12 years old. Watch them watching other children and how they're playing. And that's how they learn, is by observing. We do this as adults when we're in a new context and we don't know how to act or behave, or whether it's time to stand up or sit down, or should I be formal or informal. We observe other people around us and we mimic their actions as well. So observing and mimicry is a really key aspect to learning. Children also learn through experimenting. They will try one activity and see if it works to their satisfaction. If it doesn't, they may try it again, or they may try something a little bit differently. So experimenting is a really important aspect of learning. Rehearsing, I've talked about this in other videos. Imaginal rehearsal is something even sports icons use to imagine hitting that baseball in a particular way. And the way it works in the brain is it helps us lay down the neural pathways for that activity, even if we're imagining it. So rehearsal is something kids do all the time. They practice doing a thing until they get it right. And again, we do this as adults as well. Fantasy play is a kind of puppet play, dress-up play, uh, sand tray play that we utilize in therapy with kids, and you can watch kids do this with each other as they are very young. They will set up a scenario and they will play through the scenario. Sometimes adults do this too. It's a form of rehearsal, taking on a new identity to maybe I can do it this way. If I pretend I'm this person, maybe I'll have a different outcome. So observing, experimenting, rehearsing, and fantasy play are really important aspects of learning. So why play therapy? And this is the beginning of the way to explain to caregivers why we're engaging in play therapy. A lot of times, children don't have the necessary vocabulary or emotional maturity to describe what happened to them or what is difficult for them or what is bothering them. And when children and adults are preoccupied with these kinds of thoughts about, I can't express why I'm distressed in some way, it really interferes with their ability to focus. So for children, it's focusing at school. For adults, it might be focusing at work, and it certainly interferes with establishing or sustaining friendships. Another reason for using play therapy that we'll talk about a little bit later is through play, you can process emotional experiences that children had before they had language. So they might have experienced something very traumatic, and they have a scent memory or an auditory memory or visual memory, but they don't have any words with it because they didn't have facility with words when the traumatic event was experienced. So using play helps them play through visually, auditorially, tactilely the trauma without having to talk about it, which is another reason to use play therapy. You're not necessarily having to go over a trauma narrative over and over and over again in play therapy. And this is a way to process the emotions that are attached to that trauma memory without having to re-traumatize the individual by talking about it over and over again. So what activities are included in play therapy? Oh my goodness, there's a ton. And I've just put a really rough list on the left-hand side of the screen. But you can see in this play therapy office, a puppet theater, some costumes, a dollhouse, an easel with some markers and crayons and other things to write with, a little chair and desk, set of chairs and desk. It's really important to have child-sized furniture in your office. I don't know what this square is. Maybe it's a chalkboard. Maybe it's a portal to another universe. You never know. Certainly in the middle is the sand tray. And over here we have, looks like cloth items, maybe puppets, some books, some figurines for play therapy. So play therapy can include this and many, many other activities. It include clay, guided imagery. There are thousands of books that you can read with children about feelings and incidents and processes, etc. There's music, there's board games, there's creative games. So we'll talk about some of them in a little bit more detail as we move through today's topic. So I've put in this PowerPoint a 4-minute explainer video of what is play therapy. And this is excellent to use with caregivers. So I would run the video on my smartphone with a caregiver, give them the link as well so that they can review it a couple of times. This person does an excellent job of summarizing in 4 minutes what is play therapy, why we do it, what is our role as a therapist. So our role as a therapist is to create a therapeutic environment, engage in therapeutic activities. We're not there to correct a child's behavior or take on a parental role with the child. So she goes into that as well. If this particular person and language and video doesn't seem accessible to your clients, I encourage you to make your own 4-minute video in the language that you speak and the cultural context in which most of your caregivers live so that you can share that with caregivers and use that as a way to explain to them why you're engaging in play therapy. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at that video and then we'll continue. Okay, I want to give a little bit more theory about social emotional learning and why we need to engage in social emotional learning with children. And I would also say adults who did not have a supportive child environment as children or did not have the ability or the opportunity to form a firm attachment to a particular caregiver. So think about a time when you've been very distressed and you have high emotional arousal. You're just feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Well, one of the things that happens when we're emotionally overwhelmed is that we're unable to engage in mindfulness when we're in our fight or flight response or a panic attack or everybody just stopped talking to me, one of those incidents. And so when we have high emotional arousal without underlying self-awareness, it just completely overwhelms individuals. Folks don't have the ability to engage in emotion regulation and be able to downregulate their emotions and their physiology. And when they're unable to do that, it blocks out feelings. And so we miss out on what processing that feeling could help us learn about ourselves or help us develop meaning about. And frequently, folks in that state with the high emotional arousal all the time, the inability to downregulate through the use of self-awareness, they really develop unhealthy responses and become stuck in unhelpful patterns. And those are mostly the clients that we see in a clinical setting. They're coming to us because they're having difficulty with this process. So, in order to develop self-awareness, we need to have the ability to downregulate a little bit, to engage in those mindfulness activities, whether it's yoga or meditation or guided imagery or grounding exercises. All over time, that helps us develop the neural pathways that enables us to engage in self-awareness and self-reflection. And that state of self-awareness is paying continual attention to your internal states in the present moment. So it's being where your feet are, understanding what's happening to you in the moment. We tend to call that mindfulness. Now, this mindfulness, understanding who we are and our emotional awareness and in the present moment, our internal state, that's really necessary before we're able to understand how that's happening in somebody else. And that process of understanding how that's happening in somebody else is called empathy, right? So social emotional learning, such as play therapy, is how we learn to integrate thinking, feeling, and behaving, which allows us to engage in self-awareness. So it builds our capacity for self-awareness and gives us the ability to self-reflect on what others might be experiencing and be able to engage in empathy. So without these skills of self-awareness, of social emotional learning, how we think, feel, and behave, and being able to connect those in ourselves, really without these skills, we're much less likely to develop empathy, and it makes it very challenging for us to navigate relationships. So this is just a little bit of theory about why it's important to help kids be able to connect thinking, feeling, behaving, their physiological state with their thoughts, and be able to integrate all of this in a healthy way so that they can, so that they can engage in that sense of empathy, which allows them to engage in relationships with others. So before we move on, I want you to think for a little bit. What is the script you're going to use to explain play therapy? I'm sorry, I said to a provider, I meant to a caregiver. And what are some of the issues that you want to make sure you point out about this theory or about why we're using play therapy with a child or early adolescent, or what's my role in the play therapy room? So take a minute to think about that before we move on and maybe even write it down for yourself in your notebook. So we're going to talk about three types of play therapy that are very commonly used in the United States and certainly here in the Central Valley. We're going to talk about sand tray, we're going to talk about puppets, and we're going to talk about board games. So first, what is sand tray? Clients create worlds that represent their internal struggles or conflicts in the context of an enclosed sand tray using figurines. And you, depending on the age of the child, you can use it differently. Really young kids, I just let them do it. I'll say, tell me a story using figures in the sand tray, or let's make a movie using the sand tray about anything you'd like to use today, or talk about today, or process today. If the kid's a little bit older, the therapist and the client might discuss what was observed, what toys were chosen, how they were arranged, and any symbolic or metaphorical meanings. And sometimes then the client then chooses to rearrange the toys based on the discussion. So I might even with a younger child say, tell me who this figure is. What's that figure's name? What does that figure do? With a little bit older child, I might say, how did you come to choose this figure to represent the mom in this family, for instance? Or, golly, why are the dinosaurs penned in on this side of the sand tray? So I'll ask them about process as well. How Sandtray works, but it allows processing the meaning that clients to develop and a skip to their experiences through the therapist monitoring engagement with the toys or the symbols they choose to play with. It's typically a pleasurable sensory experience that facilitates a natural expression of emotions, and it's really tactile in a world in which so much of play is digital now. Kids are losing out on the opportunity to engage in tactile play, and that actually is developing some brain, disrupting the development of some neural processes. There's some emerging research on that now. And it really reduces the psychological distress of discussing the traumatic events or experiences over and over. So it gives a child the opportunity to process that without having to, again, talk about the trauma over and over. So what do you need? You need a sand tray. And for a long time, I just got a plastic box with a lid with my play sand in it. And play sand is different from kinetic sand. You can buy play sand at like Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that. And I just had the lid on it. And when I was going from site to site and school to school, that was my play therapy. And I had my figurines in a little crate with wheels on it, my little rolly, and I put it all in there and I just roll that into the school. You can buy figurines and you can spend some bank on buying figurines. I recommend going to the dollar store to get figurines, and we'll look at the playtherapysupply.com link that I have here. I frequently will look at that website to get ideas of what I should have. But you can also make your own. And honestly, I like having plastic figurines because when I did play therapy in my office, for instance, I'd have a bucket of water with a little bit of bleach in it, and I dump the figurines at the end of each session into there. And after every couple of sessions, I'd bring them out and rinse them off and dry them so that I wasn't passing on things. Really little kids are going to put stuff in their mouth. Other kids, they've eaten, not necessarily washing their hands all the time. Folks have COVID, flu, colds, whatever. Just make sure you wash your figurines at the end of each session. And what I'm going to do right now is go to playtherapysupply.com and let's take a look at this website. And I go to Sand Tray and all the miniatures. They have starter kits, they have shelving, they have rolling cart combo, but I just look at the miniatures because you need a wide variety of activities. So containers, fantasy and myth, medical and trauma, superheroes and popular characters, structures and houses, treasures and jewels, transportation, people in all kinds of configurations, different colors for different races and ethnicities. You need fences and boundaries. You need males and females. You need adults and children. Sometimes I would have um, families of farm animals. So I'd have adult cows and baby calves. So kids could play family with animals if that was where they needed to situate their processing of the information. Battle and war, dinosaurs, dogs, cats. You need aggressive figurines, you need passive figurines, you need um, heroic figurines. So I go here for examples. I don't necessarily buy from here unless they have something super exciting that I can't make or find at the dollar store. So just know you don't have to start out really expensive. You can start out with dollar figures. For instance, here, the Army soldiers or the military soldiers, just like they have in Play Story, right? 14, 15 bucks. I got them for $3 at the dollar store. So pretty much the same thing. So also I got like the matchstick cars. I had transportation. I'd buy a little fire truck figurine for $1 or $2. So do the best you can with the cheapest you can, because you will build, if you get into this, you will build your portfolio over time. So I'm going to switch now to puppet play. Puppet play is a type of drama to use to work through incidents, and it's the use of puppets to represent people, object, thoughts, behaviors through play. And it really is a way to help children develop social and emotional skills as well as promote coping skills. And you can see here, this person looks like they started with a little cardboard scene for you to play in, little puppet theater, but then they're adding drawn stuff. They just have drawn figures on like popsicle sticks. You can do that at this stage. You can get the client to make these figurines for themselves. If they make them, I always send them home with them. But you don't have to spend a lot of money doing this. So how does puppet play work? Well, the individual identifies with the character in the play and projects their feelings and interpersonal conflict onto those characters. And it enables the client to engage in communication of their distress without claiming or owning it as their own. It's not mine, it's Peppa Pig's. It's not mine, it's Batman's, right? So they're projecting these feelings onto the puppets. It also allows individuals to experiment with different characters and explore how to cope using emotional and social experiences from that character's perspective. Think of a child who has experienced trauma and how differently they might express their feelings as a turtle versus a dinosaur. So have those different kinds of puppets. And sometimes my clients would use my figurines from Sandtray in the puppet play, which was great. Resources needed are puppets, all different kinds of characters. This is about a 5-minute video of somebody in a training center who has these beautiful, expensive puppets that I know cost $45 to $50 each. So I might buy one of those, but then the rest of my puppets were finger puppets from the dollar store. IKEA has finger puppets every now and again. Sometimes I make puppets. Sometimes I'd find at the dollar store little stuffed animals that I had or some that my family had. I'd wash them and dry them and bring them to work. work. Again, you need to watch these characters too as people handle them. Sometimes stuffed animals were great characters to use in the puppet play. Sometimes I would take stuffed animals if they were the right shape and cut out the bottom or some place to put in your hand and take out the stuffing and just use it for hand puppeting. If you've got anybody in your family that knows how to sew, you can get a ton of puppet patterns online and you can make puppets very cheaply that way. So you don't have to have a whole lot of resources. You can, again, do that with cheaper resources. But it's important to watch this video about how how this trainer uses puppets to talk to clients about it. And she talks about one of her favorite puppets. So take about 5 minutes to watch this video. Okay, games and board game play. This is the use of stock or therapeutic or self-created games to help clients develop numerous social emotional skills. I think all of us use it in the children's system of care. Everybody uses, especially Uno, to engage a client and to build rapport. But there are some very therapeutic ways you can use games. Um, this is what happens when you're using the rules of the game and process of playing even a regular stock board game. This is what helps people with emotional processing. How do clients deal with losing? How do they deal with winning? How are they going to process that emotion? How do they regulate themselves in that emotion? Functioning within a structured activity, taking turns, following rules. These are skills that kids need to learn and sometimes adults need to learn. Mastering emotional skills, recognizing social cues with the people they're playing with, organizing information, using memory, planning, using executive functioning, and having, again, a tactile experience in an era of mostly digital play. So there are a lot of different ways you can do this. I have about a 10-minute video of a gentleman using a board game. He's using Candyland, a version of Candyland called Feelings Candyland with color-coded deck. I don't know if he made them or purchased them, but you can certainly make and print those your own. Take the 10 minutes to watch this video and then we'll process it as we come back together again. So the resources you need for games and board game play include just stock games, checkers, war, spade, deck of cards. You can use spades, crazy eight, war, rummy, chess, checkers works, Jenga works. So for an example, Uno can be used to teach sequencing, taking turns, organization, executive functioning, patience, reduction of impulsivity, etc. The therapist in the video used the color Candyland, and it was interesting to watch him. He was wanting to engage in the social emotional part of the child's engagement rather than trying to provide positive reinforcement around his sort of a little bit hyperactive behavior. So he wasn't spending as much time praising the child when he sat down as he was praising the child when he was engaging in some kind of interaction around emotion. So this was a 5-year-old who used facial expressions and screaming, different kinds of screaming. So he knew the different scream for excited and scared to engage in social emotional learning. So that was a really good way of using that game. Now, BHRS does have access to some therapeutic games, and you can spend a lot of money buying them. But I would say ask the agency to buy them. All you have to do is look for therapeutic games on Amazon, and you will find hundreds and hundreds of games, everything from Don't Go Bananas to Head Rush to Conversation Cubes to Mad Dragon. CBT Trip helps children understand how their thoughts influence their emotions and behavior. So there's a ton of activities that are available to you to use for board games. And if you're a little bit need a little bit more confidence about using play therapy in a very specific therapeutic manner, games and board games are the easiest way to start, particularly a structured therapeutic board game. So you can get used to reinforcing a child's engagement around social emotional learning and not just playing the game to engage them or to build rapport. So, final thoughts. I'm going to say we are not in person next week. We are still online at the Cummins Drive Training Center. With moving the trainings to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it just kind of snapped. It's like, my gosh, sometimes it takes you 45 minutes to an hour to get from SRC and series to the training center Cummins Drive. So we're going to continue to do all the trainings online for the rest of this academic year. So I want you to think about what's one aspect of play therapy you're going to explore this week. And there's some really good resources on the resources page. One article that's very good about strengths-based play and solution focused play therapy, so you can match that to a talking modality that you're using. And then a really good book, Play Therapy with Children, Modalities for Change, has a chapter on each different type of play therapy. Also, 3 associations for play therapy. If you want to get certified as a play therapist, these will lead you to training programs, one in the US, one international, and one in the UK. So thank you for watching and engaging in the activities today, and I look forward to seeing you at our next training. Take care and bye-bye.